And we are live, guys. Welcome to a very exciting DCA stream. We have a lot of things happening. We have Bitcoin price action. It's been drama. We'll talk about Solana, Tesla, gold, yield, the presidential drama, the ETF outlook, the Mt. Gox. MiCA is live in EU today, and a lot more. How are you guys? How are you doing, James?
Sorry, very good. Pressing the wrong button. It's Monday and certain things are breaking out, and we saw a lot of support levels hit really well. This is kind of, it's people sometimes think TA is astrology, but boy, does it work sometimes too. So we'll chat more about that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm just glad we don't have egg on our face. I think we were on this show last week saying, it's got to hold this 60K level and it'll probably bounce around there and it'll be a bit of support. And then I think a few hours after we went live, it went to 58K. I remember looking at the comments being like, these three are such idiots. And then
58.6.
We held the 60K level and then we've bounced from there. So
yeah,
just saying, we did call that this was going to be a moment where the market would defend it. And looks like that is what has happened. So that's good.
And the perfect storm of headwinds too. Miners capitulating full on, ETF selling, Mt. Gox FUD news fear, United States government selling, Germany selling. I mean, could you pick 5 worst headwinds to hit at the same time and for it still to hang at 60? It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, definitely a good sign for the market if you can hold through all of that.
So let's look a little on the technicals first, and then let's speculate about why. We've had this support level for the longest time, and if you guys have been following along here on the DCA show, you recognize it. And we had the resistance at 71,400, support at 60,800, and it's held again here. So we are in a ranging price action. This is not a trending period of the market like we've had before. Now we are ranging, and key then is in which direction the range ends up breaking out, if it breaks on the downwards direction or upwards direction. So clearly there is still buying interest at this support level. Why do you guys think that people are buying here? Is there any explanation? Or
I think we spoke about it last week that a lot of these things are now known knowns, or at least they were known to a lot of people before they became more publicly known. So the idea that Mt. Gox was going to make its distributions, probably a lot of people knew about that. The idea that the German government was going to sell, enough people probably knew about that. And even the US government is beginning to sell. All of these things were probably known by certain entities. And so part of the price action we already saw as a reaction to that is basically what I'm saying. So it's interesting to see after all of that news has come out, we've started to kind of bounce because I assume that people thought either we'd have a bigger reaction or it's partly priced in already. So yeah, that's how I view about this. It tells me even more that some people were in the know before these more negative pieces of news came out.
James, what do you see?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting for me is if you look at all the top wallets, the top 50 wallets, and I scan them quite regularly, you'll see that there is a heavy accumulation happening by a couple of key players. So first of all, if I can share this, we had in the space of 30 days, 4 wallets added nearly 200,000 Bitcoin. And if you look at the numbers, 47,229, 47,220, that's a big stacker. Now, could that be BlackRock consolidating across multiple wallets? Possibly. We don't know. But even more interesting is this guy. We don't know who Mr. 100 is. But the way in which Michael Dell is behaving online about Bitcoin with Cookie Monster emojis and every day doing surveys, and then Saylor and Dell going back and forth, sharing memes and retweeting each other, it's very suspicious. And when you break down how much Michael Dell is worth, 105.4 billion, he spent 2.6 billion on, if it's him, 2.6 billion already, which sounds like a lot of money. But when you're worth 105, that's a 2.5% hedge against your bags. And Michael Dell, he's a maverick. He doesn't mind taking risk. Since he was 15 years of age, building computers, he's been taking risk. So I think he's hedging his bag. So, at the beginning, I thought it was nonsensical. Like you asked me 6 months ago, Michael Dell's buying Bitcoin. You asked me today, I think there's 30 to 50% chance he is. Amanda, what do you say?
I mean, I haven't looked at enough into who Mr. 100 is. I always thought that was, a sovereign fund or some sort of institutional fund. But that being said, the concept that billionaires want to buy Bitcoin just makes 100% sense. Most of these billionaires, they're not cash rich, so they're actually rich via equity. So they'll own a stake in a publicly listed company, and they'll often be able to take out margin loans against that, against their stock in those companies, and that's how they basically get liquid. It makes 100% sense to me that as a billionaire, your main risk is that the world kind of goes wrong. And one of the best things to buy in those sort of environments are hedges. So it would be things like gold or Bitcoin. So I've thought this for a while. One of the best things, if you are ultra wealthy, it just makes a complete sense to, and ultra wealthy in particular from the stock market or from risk assets. I think the most obvious thing to do is to buy Bitcoin. So I actually think you're going to see a big trend of this. A number of different billionaires will find Bitcoin incredibly attractive as a hedge against the world. You have Robert Kobayashi, the guy who wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad, who kind of has this this thesis, and I think a lot more billionaires are starting to catch on to this being a very obvious move.
Yeah.
Let me take one question here, because this is a good one. Not to be rude, but why is it relevant who it is? I learned something many years ago that really has stuck with me. For things like crypto, it's very difficult to say what's it worth. What is one Bitcoin worth? And obviously, there hasn't been a clear answer because it has changed so much over time. So a very experienced trader said like this, that instead of bothering with that question, try to figure out what are the buyers and the sellers doing and why. If you can figure that out, you got it. So that's what we're trying to figure out here is, why are they doing something? And of course, the first step to that would be to figure out who it is. So I agree with you. It doesn't really matter who it is, but why they're doing it really matters. If it would be a very influential billionaire like Dell or someone else like that people look up to, and they're doing it because of fundamental reasons, that would be massively important. And yeah, so that's why I'm interested in that question. I think it's a good question, and that's my answer. You're muted, James.
It's not just that, but I did an analysis of the number of billionaires on the planet. When you have billionaires like Saylor and Dell and Elon Musk and Tim Cook, the Zuckerberg, they all, Chamath, they all own Bitcoin. Peter Thiel. I mean, the list goes on, and I'm just rattling a couple of top names off the top of my head. When you look at those people as capital allocators, they are the creme de la creme. There was rumor that maybe Bezos is stacking too. Who knows? He probably has a little bag. I don't think. Sorry?
Elon as well. Like I don't know if he owns some outright, but he definitely owns some through Tesla.
Oh yeah,
right?
he knows enough about it. He pretends not to, and he pretends to play with Doge and stuff, but he knows an awful lot about money, and he knows an awful lot about Bitcoin. And yeah, I mean, the turning heads moment is why this matters. If the cat is out of the bag and it is released that Michael Dell does own Bitcoin, you're going to have a flurry of 10% of all billionaires on the planet try get some. And you just need two. I tweeted over the weekend, we just need 2 billionaires to put this thing north of 100K. That's it.
There are 1,000 trillionaires in the world right now. I don't know if you heard recently, but
no, not trillionaires.
But joke this week, but yeah,
the
ultra rich
billionaires.
The ultra rich are definitely going to get into Bitcoin. It's just a matter of time. I think they probably need to be. It's a bit of a show me story still. Like it needs. If you're looking about the history of the world, gold is obviously. It's shown it over a longer period that it's a good hedge against everything. But I think Bitcoin is now trying to get into that world.
Should we continue? Do we have more on Bitcoin?
I think the 60K level has to be stressed that every time we got close to it over the last 5 days, again, it was bought up. Every time I just kind of tried to get closer, it just was repelled. And the people that are buying very clearly are, not the ETFs, but some smart money whales. Retail still isn't there.
Exactly. That is what support and resistance is. It's not magic lines. It just means that when price comes to this level, someone is buying. That's all there is. And that is what they are doing. So that's the first part of that question. They are buying at support. At one point, they might not. Then support will break. But right now, they are buying. And why are they doing it? That we don't know for sure, but we can speculate about it. So let's proceed to the next one, because you might notice a theme here. The next one is that Solana support also held. Let me put this on the bigger picture. And we had a level that we also discussed here many times on the show. On the SOL to BTC chart, the clear support is this 0.002. Each time price went there, kind of faked one time here, but then every time price went there, it bounced. Someone bought there. And actually, it's been much clearer on the SOL to BTC chart. Why is that? Of course, we cannot say for sure, but probably there are big players that are mostly crypto native. So they are not caring about the dollar, like the fiat dollar. They couldn't care less. They're caring about the SOL to BTC chart. They're trying to see if they can trade up their BTC, or that's the money that they care about. So they are trading on the SOL to BTC chart. That's why we're getting so clear levels on the SOL to BTC chart. So again, it was challenged. We talked about it last time. I felt a little bit impressed by the new launch they did to kind of try to bring down the cost even further, even though there is a cost leadership, but try to extend that lead. And then price bounced. What's your guys' thoughts on Solana here?
I think the big headline this week was the Solana ETF, right? That you had two different filings for the Solana ETF. We're still waiting to see. This is a spot ETF, and you've seen 21 shares and also Van Eck, who are two, not the biggest ETF providers, but definitely second tier. But they've applied for Solana ETF. We're waiting to see if BlackRock or Fidelity, who are the big ones, kind of move into that. I don't think we'll probably see that this year. It will probably be a next year thing. But just the idea that is in motion, I think got people bullish, and that's on top of the concepts that we spoke about before, which was the massive ZK compression improvements, and then which 10,000x cost or 5,000x cost improvements, and then secondly you saw Blinks, which is their instant payments / instant anything really. You can do so much on Solana now on X. So if you go onto X platform, you can trade on there. You can pretty much do anything you want to do on Solana. You can just do via X now. So you can do leverage trading, you can do gambling, you can do polymarket style betting, you can do swaps, you can do transfers, anything you want to do on Solana, you can now do via X. So the story it does change and just get better each week with Solana. They're always rolling out new things. So it was just good to see this. It's good to see that bounce, that people still believe in that story. I think we were speaking on the show if Bitcoin dominance could go to 60%. I did think it could touch that just before we hit the ETH ETF this week, or next week it's going to be now. But we've slowly drifted away from that. It looks like we're now down to about 55%, and Solana has probably been the biggest winner over the last week or so. ETH slightly outperformed, but it's definitely been Solana which has been the big winner out of altcoins, or major altcoins at least.
James, you've been the defender of Solana through the dark
the Solana help desk. Yeah, it's hilarious.
How does it feel now?
Well, the last 10 days, there's just been so much goodness, as Amanda mentioned, a couple of them, 2 ETFs. You got Blinks, you got the compression, so much goodness ahead of Fire Dancer. But I think it's really getting attention. But getting back to this pair trade in this chart, I find it super interesting too. Swapping between both like clockwork is like stealing candy from a baby. So for those that can do it tax-free, they should do it all day long. Build up one bag or the other. I've also had some conversations with people that are getting kind of, I don't want to say this because the Bitcoin maxes will come after me with pitchforks and knives and daggers and stuff, but the people are getting bored with Bitcoin, and they're calculating relative upside, which is a lot of what I do, is like, which is going to go higher, which is the faster horse. And now with all this goodness coming out, the actual risk profile of Solana is coming down. Whereas the headwinds for Bitcoin, you could argue, are going up. with Mt. Gox on lock. That's why everybody's worried about July. Not only do we have the quietest month of the year because everybody's on vacation, July, August are always very slow, but also the unlock from Mt. Gox, which could rattle people. But Mandy, you got a good counterpoint to the unlock from Mt. Gox, the bounce off by FTX. Maybe talk about that here.
Well, yeah, I think that's something that people are focusing on right now, which is the Mt. Gox distributions. We've already spoken about the idea that the tax implications and the holders that will be distributed to will probably mean that we don't see that much go to market to be sold. What you also have is FTX. Now, FTX, the recovery values are about 120% of what you put in. So, and it's in cash. Remember, FTX estate has been selling all of these assets. So if you actually look, it's looking to be somewhere between 14 to 16 billion that they are going to be giving back to crypto investors, most probably in the second half of this year. It does seem as though that estate is moving slightly quicker recently. So that could be a huge, huge liquidity event for the crypto markets. If a bunch of different FTX customers get 14 to 16 billion back, I imagine they are probably going to start playing in the crypto markets again. So, it feels to me that in crypto, often you just need to keep on looking where the puck is going. Sometimes you can react to the headline that comes out that week. Like if you were reacting to the US government, the German government, and Mt. Gox last week, you're actually, because there's so much inside information about this sort of stuff, you're kind of reacting probably 60, 70% too late. It's already happened. Like we've worked out why Bitcoin went from 72K down to 60K. That's because all these headlines were going to come out. And now you start to see it bounce again. You kind of got to think, okay, well, what are the things on the horizon that could come out as a big headline? And everyone goes like, oh, I need to buy it. But actually people have been reacting to it for months. So that's the sort of thing I'm thinking about that is kind of less on people's radar, that we could have this big distributions in the second half. And the sort of thing that we might see a positive reaction now for.
Actually, that's why I love these shows. I always learn something new. Of course, I knew this with the FTX, but I haven't thought about it for quite some time. Of course, because FTX has already sold the crypto. So what they will distribute is not the same distribution that Mt. Gox will do. Mt. Gox will distribute some cash and a lot of crypto. That's why people are worried that it's going to go down. But FTX has already sold the crypto. So they will distribute the cash. And what will people do with the cash? Well, they might, do some holiday with it, but they might also go and buy a lot of crypto and Bitcoin, because that's why they, invested in the first place. I hadn't thought about that. I think it's a key insight. And thanks for bringing it to the audience.
I mean, hopefully it's in the second half. That there was hope that because they've already had the cash, it's slightly easier in terms of the distributions than Mt. Gox, because they've basically got the cash now. They can start to distribute. But sometimes, lawyers like to get paid. So sometimes these things can drag on for longer than expected.
Yeah. Okay. Next topic. Next support that held was this Tesla support. We talked about it as late as last Monday on the show, and the Monday before, and the Monday before probably. At least we talked about this several times, that this support level here, I zoomed in a little bit, was a key support, and it held. And we kind of got almost like an inverse head and shoulder here, and the price has really shot up towards the next resistance here. What's happening with Tesla? James, you are an eager student of the Tesla company. What's going on?
It's a fascinating piece of disruption. One thing happened. Well, two things happened today. First of all, if I can share this little image, it was pretty clear that once we're right at that 200-day moving average, which is exactly at $205. If we hit that, typically it can be a breakout. And the reason behind this TA is you have a lot of people who are short Tesla, and they have a maximum pain point that they can tolerate. And that is that 200-day moving average. They say, okay, listen, I've just been ripped a new one. If it breaks above this 200-day moving average, I have to cover. And that's why you're getting a little bit of a squeeze, short squeeze, gamma squeeze. Not sure exactly how it's going to play out, but it's. I think it's got another $5 now or so. Last time I looked, and the second piece of news as well is the Cybercab. They came out with a patent for a self-cleaning car. which is extremely detailed. It's actually way beyond. They're going to clean the car with UV rays from the sun somehow, and a special way of rotating things in the vehicle. So it just shows you that this cybercab robotaxi is coming, and it's very real. There's also one other thing too, and I've been talking about this for weeks, and I did this 2 or 3 weeks ago. The price of Tesla was 177. Price of Bitcoin was 66.7, and I said, out to 2032, I believe, the return on Tesla will far exceed that of Bitcoin, 27x versus 9.3x. However, we've already gone up a lot. So when you go up from 177 to 210, that eats into that multiple. So it really showcases the point of getting in early, getting in hard. That's the quick update on Tesla. It's breaking out, but it's been beaten down for a long time. And there's probably another rotation. We talked about the rotation between Bitcoin and Solana. I know for a fact there's another rotation happening right now. That's NVIDIA over to Tesla by the big money in Silicon Valley.
Yep. So we have everything. Sorry, 1 second, guys. So we have support holding on basically everything. Gold also holding support so far, but looking a little bit scary. But one thing that, sorry, I forgot to share this one. So gold also holding support, but looking a little bit scary. One thing that the only kind of not so positive news today, because there's been a lot of positive news, and I hope you see the theme is basically that support are holding. But yields are going up today. I hoped that this support in yields would break down here, that we would start seeing things like this. We haven't really seen it. Instead, it starts looking like a bounce here in the yields, which could be one reason why we kind of get a little bit of a doji candle here now in Bitcoin. Could be the macro factors. I've thought for a long time that yields will start really traveling down. It hasn't happened. Now we're getting a support bounce there instead. What are your guys' take on the yields? Just one more thing. I don't think this is going to break out through the resistance. I can't see that happening. But so we're talking short term here only. Why are yields going up here, you think?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I think this, for me, this looks like a retest to see if we're actually going to go further down. I personally think if you take a step back, the reason why we're hitting all-time highs or holding support in pretty much every risk asset is because liquidity is about to get turned on. And I think yields are going down. You have the US government PCE inflation, right, that came out last week. I think it was 2.3%. I need to double check that, but like 2.3%, and rates are at 5.5%. In the UK, you have inflation at 2% and rates at 5% or 5.25%, I think it is. And EU similarly is just over 2%, and you have rates at 4.25%. Rates are high versus inflation now starting to get close to most of these central banks' long-term targets. So I think we're in for a period of rates being reduced and also liquidity going up. I think, again, if you take a step back, you saw what we spoke about last week with the Japanese banks. It's already happening in China where they're going to have to keep on pumping. But if you start to see the Fed having to basically use these reverse repo facilities to pump liquidity globally to help stop a global banking issue or a sovereign issue in top economies, then I just think that don't fade this market. The only thing that takes us off course, in my opinion, is unknown unknowns. Stuff that we just do not see coming and no one sees coming. But for me, this is a very, very bullish macro setup. One of the most bullish ones that I've seen in a long time.
That's true. And money supply is growing as well, very fast. Not only in June, but huge expectations for July through the end of the year. That will float all boats. There is a little bit of a problem, though, if I can share this slide. And this, whoops, wrong one. But this one, global shipping freight cost. This is a huge driver of inflation as well as oil. Oil is kind of down and weak, but this one's creeping back up again. And, most countries in the world, they import stuff. And when the cost to ship, whether it's a chair or a table or a computer or a phone, this has a big impact on prices. And as I've always said, the Fed doesn't control inflation. They believe they do. They control demand. They can destroy demand, but they can't control inflation. We could see another wave of inflation going here Also, when you look at the fake government numbers, economic growth looks strong. That results in higher yields. There's also a glut of bonds on the market, and therefore there's not a lot of demand. So in order to spike demand, they need to increase yields as well. Think of it as you're selling something. If the return on it is low, nobody's going to buy it. And as Mando mentioned as well, there is some geopolitical uncertainty out there. But either way, it's all the governments will cook a narrative. They'll cook the books. They'll cook the numbers to tell the story they want to tell. It's like, oh, miraculously, we made 2% inflation. Yeah. Now we can cut rates. There's still, I think, last time I checked, it's a tiny chance of a July rate cut, but 70% chance of a September rate cut. So we can pretty much bank on a September rate cut happening. And how big it is depends on the unknown unknowns. I do expect something to break. The banking system is literally hanging by a thread off the end of a cliff. I don't know if there's a stronger way to put it. We've got big banks like top 10s, top 20s that are literally no longer viable. They will need a bailout somehow. So it is an interesting time for sure.
Okay, let's move on then to a topic that's was a little bit funny. And just to clarify, we're not here to talk politics, but the political situation in the US had profound impact on the crypto markets, especially when Donald Trump came out and really supported crypto, and suddenly the Biden administration flipped on a coin, and that's why we're having an ETH ETF now. So these kind of things are important to understand the market. And the situation took a dramatic turn. While it probably wasn't so surprising to many, my old mother could watch TV like a year ago. She, is a retired nurse, and she said that, oh, but I think Biden has dementia, after like watching 1-2 minutes and on TV, on Swedish TV. So I imagine that if she can see it on TV in 1 minute, I imagine that people around him, colleagues and so on, must have seen it clearer than that. But this debate perhaps put it, from what I can read and understand, put it into the spotlight. And otherwise, it seemed like Biden would lose this election for sure, and we would get a very pro-crypto president in the United States. What do you guys think would happen now? Will they change the candidate, pull out another candidate that has actually a chance to win? And could, the Democrats pull back on the crypto support and go back to a more cracking down agenda? What do you guys think?
3 things happening. I got 3 little slides in this topic because they all just popped up recently. And again, not political, but the Dems are making a plan right now for a dignified exit. This has been made over the weekend. It's very clear what's going on. It's also very clear, like your grandmother, like every medical professional I know, they could diagnose him a year ago. It didn't take a rocket scientist. But the problem I have, and I'm very big on truth and openness and transparency, when you have people gaslighting you, for example, this, truth to power, the vice president of the United States lies openly on Twitter, lies. The media lies for 4 years during C-19 and everything else. Everybody's lying to you. The question is, how much more lies will you take? That's why I'm passionate about this. I don't care about left or right. I care about honesty. And I know the other side lied too. But the question is, some lies are just so egregious, they're not even lies, they're just stupidity. But other stuff is kind of serious here. And it's good to see Truth to Power, X, Twitter, the global forum for truth, and Elon Musk kicking the hornet's nest again, challenging the vice president, telling her she's lying. But there's one other thing too that is really important. And the reason we talk about politics is this one here from friend of the channel, Fred Krueger. Nothing matters for Bitcoin more than this election. We've seen what the plan is by certain people with the choke point 2.0 and everything else. It's very clear. They want to get rid of your non-custodial wallets. There's news actually in Denmark that they want to ban them as well. Did you hear that, CTO, over the weekend?
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, that's pretty scary.
I haven't looked into it though. Yeah.
And then the ability to not lose your bank account simply because you buy or sell Bitcoin. That's happened in the UK for years. It's happened in select banks in the United States. It's the kind of that choke point thing. They don't want you touching it. And the ability of Coinbase and Kraken to continue, etc. And then you've had your unrealized capital gains taxable at 40%, which would destroy capital markets. Okay, anybody who is in markets, they would all be straight on a plane to Dubai and just say, bye-bye, sayonara, United States, we out. This is what we care about on this channel. All right, we want people to build a better future for themselves. But if that's being throttled by people that are an administrative government that is only in for their own personal rights and being close to the Cantillo machine, that's a problem. I'd like to hear your input on this from Fred. What you think? Or are we just overly concerned? Or can we take what we've seen over the last 3.5 years and be very afraid?
Yeah, just to touch on your first point, I think objectively, it just seems as though the US has become so divisive that something like this perhaps led to a cover-up just because people were so scared of the alternative, or they just didn't want the alternative to come to power. And I think now that it's come out so late in the game, it puts everyone in a slightly more difficult position. Biden is the only person who can kind of decide if he goes. The electoral college votes have kind of already been cast, so he'll have to step down if he wants to. In terms of what it means for crypto, Trump, I think, has been more pro-crypto, but you just never know with Trump. He's just a populist. So like if the tide turns against it, I think he could very quickly change his tone as well. In terms of who could come in, I like looking at Polymarket, which is just great. Like Polymarket now is just a great place to see like what is actually going on. And they, after the debate, I think it went up to 65% chance that Trump would win. And over the course of the last few days, we've seen the chance that Biden drops out rise to about 40%. And that was at just under 20 just this time last week, basically. So
I saw that chart also. That must be the easiest chart to trade at this point. I mean, there's no way that he can
but it's a difficult
stay in the game, or can he? Or is there some technicality here? I saw someone wrote in the comments that the primary has already been held, so they can't replace him. Is it like that?
Yes, he has to basically go out himself for it to happen. In terms of the alternatives, I wouldn't say Kamala Harris has been particularly pro-crypto. They could bring in RFK, who's obviously he's been campaigning as an independent. He could very easily come in. He's been very pro-crypto. And then you kind of have unknown entities in like Michelle Obama, and Gavin Newsom is the governor of California. But to be honest, I just don't think any of these will win now. Like you've kind of a poison chalice, because I think part of the issue is that this late in the game, it also looks like such a cover-up from the party that it's a difficult one to win. So my bet is Trump is going to win this. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if he like follows through with. He's been very, very pro crypto, right? Like I've never seen anyone be so pro crypto as a politician. So it will be amazing to see if he follows through with some of the stuff that he's been saying.
And there was some breaking news this morning as well that there's a magazine called Vogue. Never read it, never heard about it, but I did see the news. And she was on the cover of this magazine called Vogue. And a lot of people now think that could be the first lady of the future who decides our future. That is the wife of Joe Biden. And Biden. She's been very vocal. So they're the three players. It's Kamala Harris, it's Jill Biden, it's Gavin Newsom. My money has been on Gavin Newsom for 18 months now. When I first saw this going downhill, he's just literally been waiting there on the wings, and he's the best fit.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the other ones probably have a better shot at the next election. So if anyone's just going to like take it on, Gavin Newsom just feels like he might as well just do it. You know what I mean? Like, because I don't think he's going to get a shot next election. Yeah.
Anyway, I think the audience has heard enough about U.S. elections, but it does have a big impact on the crypto space too.
It does. I think it's maybe it's what kind of turned the corner for everything, for altcoins, the ETH ETF. I mean, we almost forget it, but it's like 2 months ago where everything was almost getting banned. Like all altcoins are unregistered securities and they should burn in hell. And then the next day, actually, we're gonna, it's great. Did we say it was bad? We meant it was great, so we can win the election. Anyway, let's move on to the ETH ETF outlook. It pushed back a little bit. Timeline mid-end July. What do you guys think for trading start?
They said the week of the 8th, so next week it will be. It got delayed because it was meant to come out on the 4th of July, I think, and there's some sort of US holiday I'm not aware of on that day. So, yeah, I think it's going to come out. People are getting very bullish on it. I saw the Bitwise CEO came out and said they could get 15 billion of inflows around that time over the next 18 months. That would be at the upper end. I think it's well balanced now going into it. I think everyone knows the headlines that we'll see from Grayscale. So let's see. I think I was expecting Bitcoin dominance to continue to go higher, but it just feels like Solana just took the limelight very, very strongly. It was impossible for that Sol BTC chart to break down, and that's kind of pushed up a bunch of the altcoin narrative, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, the chart looks the same as it did last week. This range is still holding. It hasn't broken out, hasn't broken down, which is, I don't know, it's in a way, it's a little bit surprising that there's not a huge anticipation pump enough to break it out of the range. But yeah, it hasn't happened.
Yeah,
my base, sorry.
No, I think Vitalik wrote a big white paper again over the weekend. Honestly, I didn't read it, but it was about ETH becoming more decentralized. He knows it's a problem, and they're trying to fix that 32 ETH validator stake thing. They're trying to play catch up with what's happening in other places. But net, it will be great for the space, so I'm very excited for it. And we also know the other breaking news last week was Cathie Wood is rumored to be skipping the ETH ETF altogether with ARK and going straight to Sol, which you know.
Well, the other negative piece of news was that the SEC came back and sued Consensus, which is one of the main builders on ETH, and they came back and sued them for MetaMask, which is a very, very popular wallet in crypto. If you have a ETH wallet, you probably were onboarded via MetaMask, and they offered staking services to Lido and Rocket Pool through MetaMask, and they're being sued as an unlicensed securities broker by the SEC. Now, this is a bit of mudslinging back and forth, but it just showed that the SEC is not done. Even if it's not calling ETH isn't a security, it's probably going to come after everything on ETH for being a security.
Yeah. The last piece of drama hasn't happened yet. That we can be sure about. We already talked about the Mt. Gox and the fact that FTX also has a distribution in cash. The next piece of news is that MiCA, the EU regulation for crypto, is going live today. And there's been a lot of things that actually weren't ready. So one of the big exchanges, for example, that I know, they had to delist USDC because the USDC hasn't actually gotten the license, which is kind of funny because that's in a way, biggest player in Europe. And they struggled, but I saw that there was, if I find it later, but there was a tweet that they're holding a press conference tonight or something like that. So perhaps they have sorted it out today. And yeah, but I think this is really great for Europe. It's bringing some clarity into, because Europe hasn't been as advanced, I would say, as the US here, who has really tried to push the boundary. There's been a lot of confusion, a lot of companies have held back. And I think bringing clarity into this will be positive for the industry. So I'm positive to this. Do you guys have any thoughts around the MiCA?
I'm not that positive on it, if I'm honest. I read through it, and CoinDesk did a really good piece on it a few days ago. It's good that we have regulation, but this regulation is wild. Like, if you look through it. So the reason why Denmark is potentially banning self-custody wallets is for this sort of stuff. There's massive restrictions on what you can do with your own self-custody wallets. The fact that Tether and Circle potentially couldn't get licenses for their coins. If you actually look at what they're trying to do, that they are in writing trying to say we're trying to limit dollar stable coins so that we can promote euro-based stable coins, because it could threaten the future of the euro. Now, that might be kind of fair, but it also really damages the ability to do things in crypto on a daily basis. We're about to see a bunch of different stable coins have to spin up in Europe, perhaps smaller, perhaps more dangerous, to help deal with euro and dollar stablecoin trades. It's something like you're not allowed to have a dollar stablecoin that trades more than 200 million a day. Now, USDC and USDT trade a lot more than that. So the concept that it's basically going to ban any big version of these stablecoins because they could threaten the future of the euro. So I actually think this is a heavy-handed, misguided piece of regulation, which is good that we have, but my God, does it need to be changed? It's really going to come in and look dated already, and put massive restrictions on what people can do.
And it's kind of funny the way they tried to go after the easiest part first, and they can't even get that right, that being stable coins, because this, as far as I know regarding MiCA, it has nothing to do with NFTs or DeFi or all the other good stuff that really needs regulation.
Well, it is. It basically bans you from doing them. Any transfer, I think, over 1,000 or 2,000 euros, you have to self-report. Like, it is wild. If you get into the depths of this, and if people are actually going to follow it, you've probably broken every single rule in crypto with the stuff that you're doing every single day.
And I know Jupiter traders that are moving like $100,000 through 50 transactions every single day. Can you imagine the reporting?
Crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so they just had the press conference, apparently. Let me bring this up. So looks like they got the license. Circle announces that USDC and URC are now available under the new EU stablecoin laws. So effective 1st of July. So that's at least good news. But I think it's interesting what will happen now, because Europe has really fallen hopelessly behind almost in the momentum. Where is the leadership happening in this whole blockchain industry? And it's not in Europe. It's mostly in the US, partly in Asia, and less so in Europe. And that was the same thing like with Web 2. It became Silicon Valley, not London or Paris or Stockholm. So let's see if Europe.
Did you see the headline that came out from the UAE this week, which is very similar? It basically said we're going to ban. Just type in UAE bans crypto. They very similarly came out and said that they're going to ban USD payments. See. So they're going to have massive restrictions now on any stablecoin payments in USD, in dollars. And there's a lot of, again, talk about the fact this could bring down crypto there. So it's what you're really seeing is a bit of a fight back against dollar dominance in crypto. That's basically what the whole of the EU MiCA rules were about. And then you saw this from the UAE too. I think that's what we're going to start to see as a trend.
I mean, that was the first reaction. If we go, but now we talked about the politics, and Donald Trump has been very pro-crypto. But if we remember back, the first reaction of almost all politicians, including him, who is currently the most pro-crypto of all, was that no, we must defend the US dollar. The US dollar is like the champion and everything else is a competitor. We should crack down on the competitor. That is the gut reaction. And I feel that that's a reaction of every politician when they start coming into this space. We need to crack down on it. We need to stop this competitor. To our money, we are the ones who's doing the money. And but yeah, I think it will go back and forth. The second stage is usually that they realize that there's an element of competition here. If they don't do it, some other country is going to attract all the talent, and this is where all the innovation is happening. And BlackRock, these kind of people understand it, and he will explain it that no, guys, we're going to tokenize everything. Everything's going to be a crypto. So better get on this new technology. It's like internet is coming now, guys. You can't just stick to the library and those things, sending papers in the mail. We have to start doing emails now. So I think that there's kind of a maturity here. But one thing that is good then with MiCA, it's clarifying things like that. can you pay for stuff with crypto or not? Actually, yes, you can then in EU. So it's not banned. So I think I agree with you. I think that the outcome of the regulation is mostly wrong, but at least there is a regulation that is kind of starts clearing things up. And hopefully there will be revisions, like people like Circle will work with them and, you know, iron out the kinks, and we get something clear in the end. But I do think that there's still too much restrictions, and the US and parts of Asia will continue holding the lead, like smart nations like Singapore and Switzerland. And I do think UAE will come around on this as well. And will continue to take the lead, and including the US here.
Yeah, MiCA for me feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or maybe 1 step forward, 2 steps back. It's allowing you to pay for things with crypto, but then only allowing stablecoins that can with $200 million of transfers a day. It's like, it's just weird. It's where they've come up.
Oh yeah, that's bizarre. That's bizarre. It cannot stay like that. It cannot stay like that. Do we have other topics? Or otherwise, guys, in the comments, you can ask questions. We'll try to bring some of them up.
Yeah, 2 very quick items I have that I think are interesting. One is this chart. We have had the S&P 500 had the best first half of a year since 1976 in an election year. And the good news is, when you have a very strong first half in an election year, you have a very strong second half too. So when you hear folks like JP Morgan saying, oh, the market's going to crash 30%, remember, they've been saying that for 3 or 4 years. They obviously, I don't know what they're trying to do. They're embarrassing themselves completely. And then one other piece of breaking news I thought was interesting is Sony is buying a crypto exchange in Japan, and Metaplex bought more Bitcoin as well. And the dollar yen is just tanking. So I thought they are interesting little points, if you guys have any thoughts on those.
I think dollar yen plays into what we said last week, which is you're going to see a big reversal on that the moment that the US realizes that all these Japanese banks are going to start dumping US treasuries at a pace never seen before. We're talking about hundreds of billions worth of treasuries, and all that will mean is a huge printing of dollars to help deal with that. So for me, I'm looking for the reversal in that, if I'm honest, because Japan has an ace up its sleeve in that it's the #1 foreign holder of US treasuries, and that's got to be fixed. So I think look for the reversal in that one. I thought this Sony news was interesting. I think this exchange kind of went bankrupt, and then Sony's kind of buying it out of bankruptcy, but definitely an interesting move in Japan. Obviously, there's been a big push in Japan from a political level to get more into crypto. It's kind of wild to be at the forefront of many different forms of technology, or at least up there, and be nowhere in crypto. So to see some of these big Japanese conglomerates move into crypto, I think is bound to happen. You started to see it in South Korea, and it'll be interesting to see how this now happens in Japan. For me, on the stuff to bring up, like it feels like meme coins have kind of settled down a little bit. Definitely not as strong as they were as a narrative. They did outperform on this bounce, but so did a bunch of different altcoins. It's been a bit more mixed. Like, for example, Helium, which is we spoke about as a DPIM project. I think that was like one of the top gainers over the last week. But then you also had a bunch of different memes. So it feels as though it's a bit more evenly distributed about which sectors are doing well recently, which I think is interesting. And you've seen a slight revival in the NFT market, which I think has been relatively interesting. With a market which has been blown up and everything went down 95%, you've seen stuff probably bounce 50% now, 60, 70%. So people are moving some of their meme coin gains and finding a new thing to gamble on. So I would be unsurprised if you see some of those stories kind of come back.
Yeah, let's take some questions. Solana alts, that has been one of the best performing categories this season. Do you guys, Mando, do you still see that category, or is it base meme coins coming now, or what do you see?
I think Solana alts haven't been a great trade, if I'm honest. There were good airdrops, but then since then, Jupiter's done well, and potentially Jito to a certain extent, but I think it's been better just to own Solana, if I'm honest, than most of these. A lot of them have disappointed, and the charts don't look so good because they kind of follow they're just governance tokens of some protocol, and there's not really much value under there. So I think my favorite play on Solana is probably Solana, but they're potentially. I guess you could own Jupiter. It does feel like Jupiter's just a behemoth that is going to mean so many different things that I would, if I'm going to back one thing as an altcoin on Solana, it would be that, just because I think it's, and you could say that deep in stuff. So we spoke about last week, maybe like Helios would be one of the best DeFi deep in plays. But for me, it's tough for me to just not own Solana. It just feels like that's the undervalued thing here. Like,
yeah,
you can,
and in counter to that, though, if you look at, like, if you were getting into Sol alts in November, December, January, February, you did really well. Towards mid-March, they began to sell off hard because, you know, Solana made a new all-time high and they all tanked with it. Since then, Solana has outperformed things like Nasana, things like Jupiter, etc. So it's all about timing. I do believe, I look at a lot of the pair charts, I do believe many will come back, but right now, people are unsure of Bitcoin. Everybody's is now focused on the ETH ETF. Yes, Solana has so much good news coming out. It's mind-blowing, but the price still hangs under 150. It's just one of those things where we're in limbo. And crypto will move fast when the time comes, but this is the time for me to stack things that are deeply oversold, but I'm waiting for the turning point. You know, things like Jupiter. I own JLP, I own Nasana, I own a lot of these names. And I've been dabbling in some of the smaller ones too, because some of these are tiny, like $20 million market caps, but they've got huge adoption and huge use cases, like online gambling and stuff. So, but you're right, Jupiter is super interesting. And even other players like Radium now does more volume than Uniswap, which is completely, like, I mean, completely smokes it by a factor of 3x in the month of June so far.
Yeah.
Well, June is over. It's just bonkers.
Well, Jupiter is an aggregator, isn't it? It's not actually a DEX. I think it does some DEX stuff, but it's mainly an aggregator. So all the flow that you see through Jupiter eventually goes to Radium as well, a large percentage of it. But yeah, I own a huge amount of JLP. I've already spoken on this. Bring up that chart. That thing is got the best Sharpe ratio in crypto, in my opinion. Like, doesn't really have down days. On up days, it slightly underperforms. But do you have that? Yeah.
Do a JLP over Sol pair chart. That's the interesting one.
Is that JLP? No, that's not JLP.
Yeah, it doesn't show on TradingView, I don't think.
JLP.
You said, I thought you said JLP.
JLP
Sol. We should have that here probably. One second.
I don't think it's on TradingView. You got to go
to. This is Jupiter Perps. This is not J.
That's it.
That's the one.
Yeah. Just doesn't really have down periods. Like, even when Solana, I mean, Solana is down over those few months. And I mean, when did Solana top? In March?
Yeah.
Right. So where was JLP in March?
That was.
I think this is Jupiter Perpetual Contract.
It's called. I think it was like up 20% since then, roughly. So.
Yeah, and it's okay. If this is the correct chart, then it looks fantastic, right? This is an ascending triangle here, and it's
remember this is the pair chart. Those Jupiter over Sol, or JLP over Sol. So
yeah. Okay.
That's why it doesn't show you exactly what's going on.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, that's what I have, because I just think it's a good thing to own, and I can sleep and it earns me yield. I don't have to worry about missing a trade. You basically make a play on Solana DeFi volumes.
Yep.
And then, yeah, like I said, I have other high beta plays, but this is just an easy one for me.
Great. Should we take final question? I'm not sure we're seeing all the comments here. If the comments that are in your stream, I think, goes in your feed.
No, the comments are same. I think of.
Are they the same? NVIDIA, where is it going? I mean, it's been moved up massively. It's a little bit late to this trade now. NVIDIA was one of those that had such a clear entry. it was let me blow this up a little bit. This was an inverse textbook, inverse head and shoulders, and the trend turned back up. But guys, that's like in February, March 2023. And then, of course, a lot of people are waking up now, 1+ year later, but price back here was like 18 or 20.
Yeah.
So now it's 123. So it's always a little bit risky to chase after something. Realize I should have bought it 1 year ago when the entry was. If you kind of, it feels like it doesn't matter, but if you bought then at the top here, now you're down 16% instead. So where to put the stop loss. That's the problem. If buying late, it's very difficult to figure out, okay, if you are unlucky then you buy the top, where do you cut it? Where is the invalidation? Where's the stop loss? That's why it's a bit risky to chase after entries that have already gone.
Yeah, I think this trade is very easy to sum up in simple terms. $3 trillion market cap. Will it triple to 10 or 9? The answer is no. Simple answer. So there's very little upside here, and I get called out at $128. So I've kind of sold calls against my position, and hopefully I get called out and then just rotate it all into Tesla, because that's what the smart money is doing right now. The hedge funds, the big VCs, they're all offloading. The insiders are all selling, and they're diversifying. Hopefully some of the NVIDIA people are selling their stock and buying Bitcoin.
Tesla chart looks good, doesn't it? Just look at it there.
Yeah, it bounced right there at support. We talked about
FOMO.
it.
It's got a FOMO
last
a bit,
week.
isn't it?
And
yeah.
And we said it. I mean, the only one that looked like there was new opportunities, if looking at all of these otherwise, like Apple, Amazon, Google, NVIDIA, Microsoft, they kind of all look the same. And it's like 1 year late at least, or 40 years late if you look at Microsoft. But even at if we're looking for new entries, the latest entries were back here in spring last year. The only tech stock chart, major tech stock chart that looked dramatically different was the Tesla, that has had a really bad 2 years, but is now actually bouncing on support. So that then you have an invalidation if you enter there and put invalidation below. So yeah, good questions. We take one final one. Tesla should tokenize all its components as separate meme chain coins. Exactly. Yeah. Okay, we covered this. The Twitter Sol partnership. What can X do? Does it mean that X has great upside? I mean, I really like the Twitter stock. I was very sad when I had to sell it to Elon Musk, because I felt that was the social media platform with a lot of upside. But yeah, I actually tried. When was it? 2 years ago. So if I could figure out a way to buy some stocks still, but I gave up. It was too complicated.
And the joke is now Reuters publish Twitter posts as their real-time breaking news. Yeah. it's completely destroyed the traditional mainstream media, newspaper, financial TradFi rag news. And anybody knows if something happens and you want to find out what happened, you do not go to the Wall Street Journal. You do not go to Bloomberg. You only go to one place, because the others take hours or days to figure it out. So it's kind of stunning.
Yeah, I actually thought the opposite of this, because I think Twitter's been trying to build a payments business for a long time, and been trying to get money transmitter licenses in all the different states, right? And then Solana just comes across one day, and this has built a whole payments slash money network across X without X's permission, basically. I thought it was super interesting, and if I'm honest, I'm not really waiting for Twitter payments now that this is here. You can do literally anything with Solana. I think it's really it doesn't onboard people necessarily. Like, you need to have a wallet, you need to be a crypto native to be able to do this, in my opinion. So maybe Twitter's is a bit more like it will link to your bank account and then you can go from there. But this was a wild development for Solana, in my opinion, just to be able to just build it natively across X instantly.
I think
Definitely.
that the difference there, if I could challenge a little bit, because I was blown away. Now it's what is it? It must be more than 10 years ago, and went to China and realized that they have these super apps. 15 years ago, maybe, where
Yeah.
like everything is so tightly and nicely integrated from a
WeChat.
user
Yeah.
experience perspective, not from a privacy perspective. Very bad for privacy, but from user experience is great. You have everything in one app. You can, book and do things and pay, and it's all very neat. And you have your money and your investment. You have literally everything there in that one app. And we don't have that still. To the 15 years later, we still don't have it in the West. Of course, maybe that's better from a privacy perspective, but I'm shocked that no one has built that. And I felt that maybe that someone was going to be X in the end, who kind of build that, and X becomes the super app and you have everything in there. But it hasn't really yet. And yeah, I mean, time is running. It's about execution, and yeah, maybe someone else built it in the end. But there is a difference in user experience for the like average person who has never used crypto or anything. If it's all built in there and you can pay with it, and it feels like any other payment system.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but I think it's very positive news. If we sum up the week, it's very positive that Bitcoin held this support. If this had broken down, it would be a very different situation. But now support held so far. Only perhaps slight worry from my side is that the yields kind of bounced instead of breaking down, but perhaps it's only temporary. But overall, everything has held support. Solana held support. Even ETH has held support. BNB held support. Solana, we talked about. Tesla held support, and Bitcoin held support. So it's been a very positive week. Everyone got a little bit worried, myself included, but in the end, support is still holding. So if that situation changes, I will change my mind. But while support is holding, I remain bullish on Bitcoin and all these assets. Any final words, guys?
No, eternally bullish. I think we're going higher. It's just a matter of when, not if.
Yeah, and I think the other simple thing is this stuff moves fast when it wants to. Like Bitcoin shot up $3,000 in 26 hours yesterday, depending on the time frame you measure, and that was pretty impressive. What's the exact number? It went from actually 60,600 to 63,800 in 19 hours. That's a big move. So, this stuff it swings violently, and that's on a Sunday. So again, be on the train. Don't try and time the train.
And I think also it seems so dramatic, like this. Oh my God, we're crashing. We were at 70,000. Now we're at 60,000. Look how small. If you don't see the numbers, when we zoom out here, look how small this little bit of ranging price action we have here. It's tiny.
And it all goes back to the 90-day post-halving consolidation. That goes on till the 15th of July or so. So 2 more weeks.
Yeah.
Then the miners will be done shedding their bags. Hopefully, the U.S. government and German government will stop. Maybe the carry trade will come back if the funding rates return. Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah. So don't get too stressed out here, guys, with 5-10% here. It's not going to matter in the end. These moves are huge in Bitcoin. So either this is going to go much higher, or, it's going to be some completely different outcome. Tiny moves here, 5-10% here. It doesn't matter, guys. Just zoom out, look at the big picture, and that's all we need to do.
Exactly. Well, Hugo, thank you so much for moderating. CTO.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda, for coming. Hope all is well.
Monday.
Yes. And
this time I will end the stream the right way.
I think I'm modding next Monday.
You're modding next week. Yeah.
Yeah, and we might have a special guest too. We might be adding somebody to jump in. So fingers crossed. Mix it up.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Bye.